when you think of stand for something, there's a phrase that says if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Mm,
And so when you think about stand for something as a leader, if you think about building a culture and you have a leader and you don't know what they stand for, then basically you're just doing your job and they're just doing their job. But if you have a leader that is willing to share with you what they stand for, what their values are, what their mission is, what their purpose is, that's something that you can get on board with. And if you think about even coming from the highest end of an organization, if that person, that CEO or any other C-level executive is sharing with you what they stand for, and going back to number one, they're authentic about it and they hold themselves accountable for standing for those things, then you're going to want to follow. When I left the experiential world and started my own brand consultancy, I had a keynote called Stand for Your Brand.
mm,
And I'm very big about the personal brand because I do believe, I spent 15 years in experiential marketing. And so I learned a lot, not just from my agency team, but from working with product managers and branding executives at some of the biggest brands in the world. And so really, I did not take one marketing class in college. And yet
mm.
here I am, the CMO of a billion-dollar organization. All that came from learning on the job. And so when I started doing this keynote called Stand for Your Brand, it really is about breaking down what it takes to not only build a brand, but keep it consistent and keep it growing to the point where people know who you are, what you stand for, and who you're trying to help. So that's the essence of stand for something.
And why do you think people are more likely to follow a leader who's transparent in that way and authentically shares their purpose and their values?
Yeah, I think we're human beings. And I think that's
Get out
the
of here.
yeah, I think that's the essence of it,
we
right?
we forget
I,
that so much in business, right? It's
we
humans
really
dealing with humans.
well think about it. You watch the news, and there's somebody that you respect, whoever that may be. And I'm not even talking about politics, but there's somebody that you respect, and suddenly something comes out that you think that this person, whether
Mm,
it's a celebrity or an executive at a company or whatever, and they seem to be the kind of person that you aspire to be.
hmm
And then all of a sudden something comes out in the news that what they did was completely the opposite of the image that they're putting forth. And so
hmm
what you basically say to yourself is, well, that was a farce. I was, and you feel, I mean, when that happens to you, you can dig in and say, oh, he or she didn't do it, right? Or he, but if you really accept that that person made bad choices and yet still try to put an image out of themselves that's different than who they truly are, that is so defeating.
mm,
So it's kind of like when you find someone that does stand for something and that follows through, and that translates to how they do business, it translates to how they treat their people, it translates to how they promote people within an organization, how they treat customers. um, you know it's all the little things that come out. So I think that's why it's so important to stand for something, because to your point, we are more likely to follow people that are like us, right? That have the same values as us.
mm.
And
Yeah.
so when that is apparent, then we're more likely to, as they say, run through a wall for someone.
I would take it a step further, maybe, and even if the values are a little bit different, but they're noble values, that can create that sense of, oh, I trust this person, I want to follow this person, right? Like, and so when it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong here, but just in summary, it sounds like your concept of stand for something is to not only be really clear on where you stand, what your purpose is, what your values are, but then you better live that stuff. Right? So we're talking about integrity here, right? So
That's the most important thing. When I talk about branding, there's really four cornerstones to building a brand. There's identity, communication, your actions or behaviors, and then there's unique value. So
mm,
to your point, yes, it's like identity is I say who I am, you communicate a certain way, but it really is about living the brand. It's about living your values every day, because your reputation, your brand does not take a day off. It does not take a minute off. I mean, how many times have you seen someone tweet something that just does not reflect, right? And then they'll come back and they'll say, that's not me. No, that is you. That's actually the worst version of you, but that's
Right.
still you. And so I think we all have an obligation to try to live our best selves, to try to
Mm,
live to the best version of ourselves, because we are human beings. We all have those tendencies to be, not perfect, right? And so, but can we try? Can we try to live our best selves? And we do that, I believe, by standing for something.
got it. So you had listed in the branding world how the second element is communication, right? So you're communicating what it is that you stand for, what your values are. So in the world of marketing, I think we're all very familiar with how that's done. The companies that do it well, like Apple, Subaru, they are kind of really leading with their why and their values. How does a leader do this? Like how does a leader, and let's remove it from the C-suite, because obviously this is a core, in my view, this is a core job of the executive leadership team, is what are the values that are going to guide our uh, behaviors when we're executing on our strategy. What is our purpose? What is our vision and our mission? But let's say, I'm a VP, or I'm a mid-level manager, or a director, somewhere other than the C-suite that's kind of creating this high level. What should I be doing other than living my values? Or should I follow the branding methodology of, should I be communicating my values and what I stand for, not just with my actions, but with words and other forms of communication?
Absolutely. That's all we have to
So,
communicate,
so
right?
how do we do that? Where would you recommend to do that skillfully? I agree with you. The most important thing is just to live it, right?
Yep.
What I really hear you saying is like, nah, you gotta, like, especially if it's a new team member, right? If they're only there for 6 months, they might have had a chance to see you in a pressure situation. They don't know what your values are necessarily unless you tell them. So how do you recommend we do that skillfully?
Yeah. So I think words matter, right? They say that words create worlds. And so it's the words that we choose to use.
Mm,
It's funny, I believe, I know, my brother, John Gordon, who's written all about positivity.
right.
And I firmly believe that when you think about marketing as a leader, it really does come down to this idea of positive communication. That's very hard to do when we are wired for the fight or flight mechanism.
Yes.
John will tell the story, and I'll tell the same story about our dad, who was an undercover narcotics cop, in New York City. So we grew
Mm.
up in a house that I would not exactly call positive. The communication was not exactly positive.
Right.
And so we need, and when I say we, the collective we need to work on the words that we use to best communicate our aspirations and our goals.
Mm.
50% of the words in the English language are negative, 30% are positive, and 20% are neutral.
Ah,
So when
man.
you really think about that, we are more likely to say negative things than positive. I used to call my dad up and I used to be like, "How you doing?" He'd be like, "Can't complain." And I'm like, "You just did. Like, you just complained, right? You could have said anything."
Yeah.
And I believe, I go back to the idea of no bad days as a leader. I used to have a CEO at one of the agencies that I worked at. He'd get off the elevator, he'd put his head down, he'd walk through the offices and the cubicles, not say a word to anybody, go into his office and shut the door. And
Mm,
you could feel the energy that was in the room
hmm.
just suddenly just go out, just like a
Like a
deflated balloon,
vacuum. Yeah.
just a vacuum. And so the first thing I believe, that when you think about communication, the first thing is, number one, just do it. Like, a lot of leaders don't communicate at all.
Mm,
That's number one. And so when you don't have that communication, people will fill their own mind with negative thoughts about what's going on. Then the second thing is, if you are going to be a leader that communicates, you have to remember that it's being a leader is like having a spotlight on you. And so with the words that you use, how you treat people, how you engage, from a communication standpoint, everybody is watching that. And so if you are doing that frequently, and if you are doing that more positively than not, then you're more likely to get that back, right? And
Mm,
I always tell leaders, if you're seeing people acting or communicating in a certain way, you can't blame them. You're the leader, you're the one with the accountability. And you have to look within yourself first and say,
mm,
are you modeling that bad behavior? Are you modeling the less than positive communications out there? And if so, you have to take a look at that. You mentioned the Ritz-Carlton. And I work with them from a consulting standpoint, and I learned a lot from them. Actually, I was able to bring stuff to them, but I love when you go there, and I've been there as a customer. I love the brand; they take care of me when I bring my family there. And you're sitting there, and somebody comes over, and you say thank you for the water, and they say my pleasure,
hmm.
right? And it's like, was it really your pleasure to pour me a glass of water? Well, maybe not, but actually, if it's supposed to enhance the experience, then yes. So I always tell people, whenever I'm in kind of those situations, and I say thank you, and someone says to me, "No problem," it's like, yeah, I would think it'd be no problem, right? I
Yeah.
absolutely I hate that phrase. And I think when I talk to leaders and when I try to get them to start to communicate better, it's little shifts like that. It's
Mm,
basically saying, are you communicating like everybody else? Or is there something that you can do? Is there a way that you can communicate that makes someone say, I really want to be around that person?
mm.
And I'll give you one last thing, man. I know I'm kind of going on here, but one last thing. It
I love
starts
it.
with hello. It starts with hello. It starts when you walk in the room, right? If someone says to you, "How you doing?" Right? When I do it in Australia, it's actually "How you going?" But in the US, it's "How you doing?" Right? And if someone says to you, "How are you doing?" as a leader, you have an opportunity right there to elevate the energy in the room, or again to deflate it. So, how you doing? I'm fine. Okay, fine's not a word. Again, fine's like no problem. Get it out of your vocabulary,
Right.
right? How are you doing? I'm awesome. I'm amazing. I'm fantastic. Are you? Maybe not. Maybe you're dying on the inside, but you need to know that there are people out there that are looking to you. If you're amazing, right? Or maybe you're not, but you need to coach yourself into be amazing. But the point is, when you're putting it out there that you're not having a bad day, you're basically saying to everyone, and I don't expect you to have a bad day either, right? So if I'm amazing, you can be amazing too. So it really ends up being modeling that communication and modeling
Mm.
that behavior.